Coming up on this episode, breaking down Klay Thompson's move to the bench in the Warriors' last game before the All-Star break against the Jazz last week. Plus, LeBron James to Golden State. That's what the Warriors tried to make happen reportedly before the trade deadline. So should they have tried to make a move for the four-time MVP, and could they revisit it in the summer? Yes, welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast as we enter the second half of the season following the All-Star break. I do apologise. It's been nearly a week or so between episodes. I've actually been away over the last 4 or 5 days. Didn't quite find the time. But All-Star Weekend just finished off here in Indiana. Pretty disappointing, to be honest. As I said, I was away, so I didn't really catch a whole lot of it. I missed the whole All-Star game, I won't lie, and I don't particularly care. Some of the other stuff was okay. I did get to see the Steph v Sabrina 3-point shootout live, which was exciting and probably the best part, especially for Warrior fans, I suppose, who otherwise, didn't get too much to be interested in outside of that, and obviously Steph being in the All-Star game. The dunk contest, missed that completely and didn't really care. Did see that the skills challenge, and if Anthony Edwards is going to shoot and pass the ball left-handed and whatever else, then I just couldn't give a crap about that as well. All-Star Weekend, it needs to be revitalized somehow because, this is not the first time that I've felt this way. Like, I've been this way for quite a few years now where it doesn't really interest me whatsoever. Sometimes the 3-point contest can be cool. Dunk contest hasn't been great for a few years. And the All-Star game, if the players aren't going to care, why should we care? And the NBA is going to need to do something here to, as I said, try and revitalize it. There has been some good suggestions. I can't remember who said originally, but I think the idea of whoever wins out of the East and the West getting home court advantage in the finals, that's probably maybe the rule or the decision that I would go with to try and incentivize the players to go harder. Because for us in Australia, I'm not a rugby league fan at all, but in rugby league we have state of origin where it's Queensland versus New South Wales because they're the two biggest states that follow NRL. Most of the other states don't necessarily follow it. But even for me, I'm not a rugby league fan at all. But state of origin is huge here, and state of origin is perhaps bigger than the actual NRL season itself, with the pride on the line for Queenslanders and New South Welshmen. So to see that and then go to like the NBA All-Star game and the lack of care factor, it's such a stark difference. And I'm not going to sit here and say that the All-Star game could ever become like what state of origin here is for us in Australia. But there's got to be some element of care factor to it. And there's got to be, in order for that to happen, there's got to be some kind of incentivization. And I think giving the winning team the right to have 4 games or potentially 4 games in the NBA Finals, I think would be a big deal and would be enough, I think, for the players to care about it. And so that's what I would go with. I think, did I hear reports or read reports that the players want to be paid? I don't even think that's enough, to be honest. Like, you're talking about the best players in the league, all of which are probably on close to max contracts. Like, incentivizing them financially probably isn't really going to help. I do understand from a player perspective, like Anthony Edwards came out and said, this is seen as a break, and it is to a degree. There's no doubt about that. And there is the risk factor of, well, if you play harder, you're going to go out and you're going to get injured and stuff like that. I do get that, but I do think at some point, for the good of the league, for the good of fans, like, you've got to actually potentially put your body on the line a little bit here. And I understand that you're focused on your team first and foremost, and it is what it is. But I think if we can get to a point where the All-Star game actually means something to players, to fans, to everybody, and the product itself is a lot better, then I think as time moves forward, players are going to be much more willing to put their body on the line and actually play hard, because the All-Star game actually means something to everyone. And so, yes, in its infancy, if they come out next year and they do play hard and someone gets injured and everyone's going to be up in arms or whatever else, that's just kind of the baby steps you're going to have to go through and some of the sacrifices you're going to have to make to build the game to a point where everyone really enjoys it. And as I said, it actually means something. So, yeah, a disappointing All-Star weekend. I'm glad I was actually kind of away and didn't really follow too much of it. As I said, I watched some of it, didn't watch any of the All-Star game live, and I'm not necessarily going to go back and check the highlights or watch the game over. I'm just not going to do that. There's no real point. There was Juan Toscano-Anderson, former Warrior NBA champ, JTA, suggested he wants JK in the dunk contest. Called him the best athlete he's ever been around, which was notable. Perhaps one of the more notable aspects of All-Star Weekend for Warrior fans. The fact that JTA said that. Of course, All-Star Game, All-Star Weekend coming to the Bay and Chase Center next year in 2025. So that's probably going to pique the interest of a lot of Warrior fans, a lot of Golden State fans, because as a result, you should see more franchise players in different events, and potentially JK, hopefully, could be in the dunk contest because he's someone that could revitalize that event specifically. The way that he soars through the air, the athleticism that he has, I'm sure he could come up with something between now and next year to wow the home crowd, wow fans on TV, and provide a spectacle that fans want to see, and that will try and reinvigorate not only the dunk contest, but of course the whole All-Star Weekend as we talk about here. But we'll get on to some Warrior discussion here, recapping what happened just prior to the All-Star break, where there's kind of a flurry of games going on. Obviously, the second one against Utah was rescheduled because of Decky's passing last month. 2 fourth quarter collapses against the Clippers and the Jazz, which has kind of put the Warriors in a bit of a negative connotation, I suppose, going into the All-Star break. But perhaps that shouldn't be the case. So they're up 15 to the Clippers last week. The Clippers win the fourth quarter 44-28. Just I spoke a few episodes ago about the Warriors being really good lately in clutch situations, about not committing any fatal mistakes of their own doing, some self-inflicted mistakes. And unfortunately, like that game against the Clippers, that fourth quarter meltdown was full of some fourth quarter mistakes, whether it be shot selection, and then the big one, of course, was the Klay Thompson fouling Russell Westbrook. You're down 3 with 40 seconds to go. Just play some good defense, get a stop. You're gonna have a chance to tie the game on the following possession if that were the case. And then on the inbounds, Klay just fouls Russ for no particular reason at all. So that was really disappointing. And then the night after against Utah, really fantastic 3 quarters. You get up big. You look like you got an unassailable lead. And then, as has been the case with the Warriors season, they just stall completely, particularly offensively. They just didn't have anything going down the stretch there over the last 9 or 10 minutes. Utah come fighting back, get within 1, I think it was, had a shot to go in front on multiple occasions. They had that Larry Marketing corner 3 with 40 seconds to go, which was a good look. Then they had Jordan Collins get the rebound and completely throw it out of bounds. Colin Sexton, even at the buzzer, had that game-tying 3, which would have sent it to overtime. Didn't go down, so the Warriors very fortunate. And have you seen a flatter victory? Even if you see pods in the post-game interview, just very disappointed with the second half and particularly the fourth quarter, and rightly so. However, the end result is always what matters here, especially to fans anyway. Steve and the coaching staff and the organization might be more process-driven kind of thing, and you can definitely have situations where you lose a game, but you feel better about yourself than if you win a game. So there is that. But at the end of the day, you go to Utah for one reason and one reason only, and that's to get a win. And they do that. And so, yes, there's kind of a negative feel to things after those last 2 games before the All-Star break. But the reality is that they are 8-2 in their last 10 games. They're still, they are still in, the best stretch of their season, and they still should come out of the All-Star break with some optimism and some positivity about what they can do. Still 10th in the Western Conference, still plenty of work to be done, but still around the mark here and in a position where they can still attack, trying to get a top 6 seed, and if not a 7 or 8 seed, to get 2 chances to play in tournament. Hopefully they only need 1 there and can finish 7th and whatever else. So obviously the big news out of that final game against Utah was Klay Thompson's move to the bench, which I was out and about before the game. And when the notification came through on my phone, I was surprised, I won't lie. Now, this is, you can look at it and say this is an obvious and easy move to make for many reasons. So, starters, Brandon Pajemski's just simply been a better and more consistent player than Klay over, do you want to say the whole, I'm not sure you're going to say the whole season, but especially over the last month, let's say, he's been a better and more consistent player. You want to get your best lineup out there at the start of the game. And the fact is that over recent weeks, particularly since Draymond's return, the Steph, Pods, Wiggs, JK, Draymond lineup is easily the Warriors' best. So they have a 26 net rating this season. In saying that, you replace Pods with Klay, and it's still good. It's a 10.7 net rating with Klay. So really, it's those main 4 core guys, and then one of Pods or Klay. So the other thing is you want to reward performance, right? And Pods goes for a career high 25, along with 7 rebounds, 8 assists against the Clippers the night before. And Klay has a very disappointing night, and then culminates with that foul on Westbrook that I just spoke about. Culminates with some pretty down body language. Now, there was that kind of clip that went viral where after that, Steph seemed to put his hand out for to clap hands or whatever, and Klay kind of dismissed him, which went viral. Some of this stuff can be overstated a bit sometimes, I think, but I do wonder how much of the decision went into what happened the night before. I don't think it would be any, because I don't think Steve is necessarily going to bench Klay simply because of a silly foul late in the game or because of some down body language. I don't think that's the case. Whether it subconsciously made a difference, I don't know. Obviously the primary reason is going to be Brandon Pajemski's a better player really right now, and the Warriors as a team are a better player when he's on the floor, so you might as well get him out there starting straight away. So for all that obvious reasons statistically and whatever else, I was still surprised. And I was having this conversation with a mate of mine, and he said, if you think Klay's still a starter, then you've got Klay goggles on, and you're looking at it in a biased lens because you love Klay, which really got me thinking. And I thought, okay, so why am I surprised about this? And maybe that is a large part of it. I won't lie. I just read the numbers out to you there. The Warriors are a better team when Pods is on the floor than when Klay's on the floor. There's little doubt about that statistically. But for me, I want to try and provide the best analysis that I can. However, I do want to retain some of my fandom, right? And I might be Klay Thompson's biggest fan. I love Klay Thompson. He's my favorite player in NBA history. And I think if I speak passionately about subjects and topics, then you guys are going to find it more entertaining. So I think it's important for me to try and retain some of that passion. The fandom, why we're here is to discuss the Golden State Warriors because we love the Golden State Warriors. We want them to succeed. We want the players to succeed. And, first and foremost for me, that starts with Klay Thompson. Now, obviously, as a team, I want the Warriors to succeed, first and foremost, I should say. But, Klay is my favorite player. And for me, to see him move to the bench for the first time since his rookie season in 2012, a dozen years ago, that's it was actually difficult for me. I was pretty sad about it. I was pretty disappointed. And so that's why, this day was always going to come where Klay moved back to the bench. I didn't think that it would happen till maybe next season. I've spoke about relentlessly on this podcast over the season that I always saw Klay as a starter even during his struggles, because the primary thing for me here, outside of now, I want to move from me just hoping Klay continue to start because I love Klay and because I'm passionate about that. Let's move to an actual basketball analysis perspective. I do have concerns about the new starting lineup with Pods in there and the shooting in that lineup and whether there's enough. So Pods goes 5 for 5 from 3, I think, against the Clippers. So that was really good. And if he does that, well, he's obviously not going to shoot 5 for 5 every night. But if he can, one, shoot the ball consistently, because that's what he's struggled with a little bit over the last few weeks. He's been so impactful and so effective. However, he's been doing that by passing up on a lot of, open 3-point attempts. So he's got to shoot the ball consistently. And then obviously he's got to shoot the ball consistently well, and be, a high 30s shooter, which he has been on the season, to be fair. But again, it's that volume, and it's just the space that Klay opens up with the fact that it doesn't matter. I've said this again before. You're probably hearing me repeat this, but it doesn't matter what Klay shot in a game, whether he's 10 for 10 or 0 of 10. NBA defenses are going to still guard that guy. He's one of the top 5 shooters of all time, potentially top 3, potentially top 2, potentially just behind Steph. NBA defenses are always going to guard him, and I think it's underrated how much space that opens up for the likes of Steph primarily, but you've got this ascension from JK and what he does in terms of attacking the rim. Well, like you've seen these last couple of games, I feel like JK's effectiveness has perhaps slid a little bit here with how much Pods has been playing and how much those two have been playing together, because all of a sudden, like, if you've got JK attacking the rim and you've got Klay in the weak side corner as opposed to Pods in the weak side corner, I can guarantee you that defender guarding the guy in the corner is going to be much more willing to come over and help on the JK drive when it's Pods in the corner than when it's Klay in the corner. And so it's this kind of thing that I'm going to really be keeping an eye on here. Is Pods is, yes, a better player right now than Klay. I'm not disputing that by any means. But how their presence on the floor impacts others. And Pods is a winning player, and he makes his teammates better, and he does so many things to impact the game. His playmaking has been absolutely fantastic, and that in itself helps. It does help others, I should say. I do wonder what, obviously Chris Paul coming back here at some point post the All-Star break, I do wonder how it kind of relates to that, because obviously if you've got Pods and CP coming off the bench, as Pods to me is more of a point guard than a shooting guard, even though he's coming into the starting 2 spot for Klay. He's still more of a primary point guard to me than a shooting guard, and I think that's where he will ultimately develop in the NBA. But as Steve likes to say, he's just a basketball player. He's kind of positionless. He does so much stuff, both offensively and defensively, that he can just be a connector in lineups, really. But I do think it's difficult. Like, if you've got Pods and CP, it's kind of difficult to play both guys, 20 minutes off the bench, as opposed to if you've got one of them in the starting lineup and one of them off the bench. It's probably going to be easier for Steve to play, Pods 25 minutes and CP 20 minutes or whatever that may be. So I don't know if there's a relation there to why Pods is in the starting lineup. But to me, I was just surprised, and I do wonder about the shooting, because Pods is going to have to take them. It does put a little bit more pressure on Wiggs, whose 3-point shot has been largely down this season. He's had some nights where it's been fine, but it's still not at the consistent level it's been at in the past. JK is still clearly a work in progress. There's no doubt about that. And Draymond, who's still around 40% from 3 this season, but our team's guarding him? No. That's my biggest concern. Now, obviously, in the over 100 minutes I think they've now played together, that hasn't been an issue, and they've got a 26 net rating. But obviously, as we move forward here, as this lineup plays more, defenses are going to key into this a little bit more. And so I'm not worried, but I'm fascinated to see kind of what the the production level is like moving forward here if this is the starting lineup. Steve said after the game that this is going to be a fixture at least for the first few games after the All-Star break. Not saying that Klay's move to the bench is permanent, but it's clearly going to be something that he tries out for a while here. And obviously, if it's successful, then it's probably going to become a permanent thing. On Klay and just his ability, I suppose, to come off the bench and be productive, 35 points. What a response. It's this classic Klay season where I think I wrote about the other day, like the kind of feel around him turns on almost a nightly basis. Like, it's so up and down. There's positive here, negative here. And there was, like, even on that night, there's the negative, obviously, of being demoted to the bench. And then there's the positive of coming off the bench and having a season high 35 points within the first three quarters. Had one of those kind of patented stretches late third quarter, last 5 minutes of the third, he went for 18 points. And that's kind of the display that shows you that, Klay still got this in him, because there's so few players in NBA history that can just get on a heater from three like he can, or even just scoring the ball like 18 points in less than 5 minutes. There's so few players that have been able to do that in NBA history, where he almost seems unstoppable. Like, the ultimate of that obviously was when he had 37 points in a quarter, but it gets to a point sometimes where defenses are just hoping that he misses rather than them being able to actually do anything to contain him. And, that game against the Jazz, that late third quarter, that proved again that Klay has still got this in him, which has largely been part of the frustrating fact, I think, for him this season, is that it's largely been negative for him and he's largely been down, but he does have these nights where it's really good and it's really positive and it's kind of a throwback to prime Klay. And for him, that would be probably the toughest part, is knowing that, hey, I've still got this in me here and there, but I can't summon it consistently to be the kind of player that I want to be and what I was in the past. So can he be still productive moving forward off the bench? Absolutely. I don't think I actually have less issues about what Klay could do coming off the bench as I do with that starting lineup and the lack of shooting and whatever else. So it's going to be interesting. It's obviously a good start, but this has been an up and down Klay, and we're going to get nights where he has 30 like this, and we're going to have other nights where he's 5 points, 2 of 10 shooting or whatever, and he really hurts the team. It's just what it's been this season, and I think asking more of him going forward, like saying that you just need to be guaranteed 20 points a night, that's just not going to happen, unfortunately, and that's why, having spoken so much about JK recently, like, his emergence is so important into being that guy who is giving you at least 15, but most likely 20 each night. Klay's comments in the post game were obviously good, and Klay in the media, I think, has been pretty good so far this season. I think he's been really honest and candid at times, and I was impressed with kind of what he said, referencing Manu Ginobili and his success, obviously, at the Spurs as a sixth man. Saying that you can go two ways, you can pout or you can get back to work and embrace it. And he did embrace it, and it was still the same old Klay Thompson. And it doesn't matter how old he is, where he's playing, who he's playing for, whether he's starting or whether he's coming off the bench. I can guarantee you that wherever Klay Thompson is playing basketball, he's not going to be afraid to put up shots. And that's what he did coming off the bench. He got straight in the game, straight putting up shots. Went cold in the fourth quarter, as the whole offense did. So he's certainly not, you're not going to single him out in the fourth quarter. But 13 of 22 shooting, I think it was 7 of 13 from 3-point range. A fantastic game, and hopefully he can continue it going forward. But as a fan, you're just going to be realistic that it is going to be up and down, and particularly even more so now, probably as a bench player, because the minutes are going to fluctuate. Perhaps more with CP3 back in the fold, Klay might have some nights where he's 18 minutes. He's going to have other nights where he's 28 to 30. It just is what it is. The other point here is his future. He's likely to be a free agent. Doesn't seem to be any extension forthcoming here, so he's going to be a free agent in the off season. And how much does this, moving to the bench, the shift in role, how much impact does that have on his free agency decision? Shams reported last week that there's going to be multiple teams interested, that Klay's probably going to explore the market. I think he said both LA teams, both Florida teams, a couple of other Eastern Conference teams. So there's going to be suitors out there for Klay. Will that be in a starting role is really the question, because I think if a rival team did come and say, we've got a starting role here for you, then that's got to impact his decision one way or another. Like it really does. And at least for rival teams now, it is another incentive that they can throw at Klay that the Warriors can't necessarily offer. And I did think, even if he started the rest of this season, I did think that would be in contract negotiations where Mike Dunleavy, Joe Lacob, whoever it was, would have the discussion with Klay. Is like, okay, this is how much we want to pay you. And part of that is because we think over the course of this contract, you're probably going to move to a bench role. And that was probably going to be part of the conversations. But obviously that's now happened ahead of time, which might actually make the negotiations easier, because Klay understands that he's no longer a set starter in this league. But it does give rival teams the incentive to come out and throw not only the contract with him, but obviously the role now as a starting two guard in the league, throwing him that in a way that the Warriors now can't. Now, of course, he could come back into a starting role at some point in the second half of the season here, but the fact this has happened now certainly does plant the seed for him going forward about, Steve's clearly not going to be afraid to bench him again if he does re-enter the starting lineup and then starts to struggle again or whatever. So I think it's got to have an impact one way or another. I'd still be surprised if he left in free agency. And again, part of that is bias from my perspective. Like, I don't want him to leave. But I think everyone, not just Warrior fans, but everyone around the league would be surprised if Klay Thompson left, and would be shocked to see him in another team's jersey. Who we could have seen in a Warriors jersey was LeBron James, apparently, before the trade deadline. Something I just wanted to mention before I finish up here. So we had the kind of explosive report from ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski and Ramona Shelburne last week, detailing how the Warriors made a play for LeBron James before the trade deadline, which is now nearly 2 weeks past. Unbelievable. Kind of, there's a notion that the Warriors were quiet before the deadline. They obviously were, in terms of, actually things that materialized, because they didn't do anything aside from trade Corey Joseph to the Indiana Pacers. But clearly they were active and and very much so in the way of trying to lure one of the all-time greats, in many people's opinion, the GOAT, to Golden State. Would have been quite unbelievable. So as the report stated, it actually kind of started on an ownership level with Joe Lacob and Jeannie Buss. And, the Lakers clearly not interested in trading LeBron, but actually told Golden State to go and contact Clutch Sports and Rich Paul, LeBron's manager, and obviously business partner and friend and whatever else, go and talk to him, kind of check the temperature there on where LeBron's head's at, because the Lakers been struggling in a similar manner to the Warriors, obviously, this season. They're ninth in the Western Conference. And the answer was a resounding no in terms of LeBron wanting to move to the Warriors. The thing, I suppose, since this report's come out is trying to work out, because Shelburne said since then that this was never, ever supposed to get out. This was supposed to be top secret and, move on, and no one ever, thinks about it or talks about it until maybe, like, if something happens in the future, which the report did say that the Warriors could revisit a potential James trade or whatever in the offseason. But it does make you wonder who leaked this, and I don't think it would be anyone from a Golden State perspective, but potentially, for the Lakers and LeBron, you get the kind of PR stunt of being able to show that, from a LeBron standpoint, that you're being loyal to the Lakers and that you want to stay here. And from a Laker perspective, you get the PR, the positive PR of, LeBron does want to be here, and that we're providing an organization at the moment that is attractive to LeBron, is not making him look elsewhere. And that's obviously a big thing for not only the current roster and the faith and trust that they've got with one another and that they've got in LeBron and vice versa. But obviously, there's been reports that the Lakers are looking for a third star in the offseason, and you're going to be much more comfortable going to the Lakers if you're confident with what LeBron thinks about the team and his own future. So it's fascinating. What the Warriors are going to do in the offseason is going to be certainly interesting, because there's been kind of conflicting reports about the Warriors wanting to add another superstar next to Stephen Curry, while there was also Joe Lacob's comment on the Tim Kawakami show about not only wanting to get under the second tax apron, but potentially getting under the luxury tax altogether, which, like, those two things don't particularly marry up. Like, you're not going to be able to get a superstar player and get under the luxury tax at the same time. So it's going to be interesting to see. Would I want LeBron on the Warriors? I think there's a lot of Warrior fans that would just completely dismiss the idea simply because it's LeBron James, simply because he's been such a long time rival with his, in his time with the Cavs and whatever else, and some of the relationships between LeBron and players in Golden State. Although, like, they've mended. Like, LeBron's best mates with Draymond. I think LeBron and Steph get along really well now. I think they've got to a point in their careers where they just highly respect each other's games and each other's legacies. But would I want LeBron at the Warriors? I think for the right price, yeah. I'm not dismissing the idea like a lot of Warrior fans would be. For the right price, yes. And it's interesting how they kind of, even on the alternate broadcast of the All-Star game yesterday, a couple of clips I kind of heard of Draymond and Charles Barkley even entering into the discussion, which is interesting. And Charles saying that if the Warriors had been stupid enough to offer up Klay and JK for LeBron, that the Lakers would take that tomorrow, which I'm not particularly sure they would necessarily. I don't think they'd take it as easily as what Charles made out to be. I think they'd definitely have to think about it, and they might not make that move. But Draymond kind of came out and said, nah. Like, I told Joe that if it required JK to be in the trade to get LeBron, that don't do that, which is kind of interesting, because 2 months ago you would have said, yeah, the Warriors would definitely sacrifice Jonathan Kuminga if it meant getting LeBron James back. But now we're at a point where, in terms of trade value, Jonathan Kuminga probably has more trade value than LeBron James, which is a funny thing to say, but also just true at this point, I think. So if it was, like, if something happened before the deadline and it was, let's say, Chris Paul, Kevon Looney, Moses Moody, I'm trying to get the contracts lining up here. We're about 39, 42. That nearly gets it done. And like a first round pick. Then yeah, you probably do, like, you probably do make that move. Again, I don't think the Lakers would, but I think I'd be happy if the Warriors did that. All right, we'll finish it up there. Thanks to those of you that have got to this episode of the podcast, whether you're listening or watching on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. Move past 400 subscribers now, which is absolutely fantastic. And thank you to everyone for the ongoing support. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252. On Twitter, you can follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Still a few days here until the Warriors return to the court to take on the Lakers on, I think, Thursday night American time. So looking forward to that one. Warriors 8-2 in their last 10 games. Hopefully the positivity and the optimism can continue as they try and secure a playoff spot here over the second half of the season.